Welcome to Tramlines, a podcast from Agrii. I'm your host, Tony Smith, putting your questions to the experts. Considering the unpredictable nature of farm margins, what straightforward opportunities are there available for farmers to earn extra income through carbon initiatives? Today, our experts will shed light on this topic. Agrii's Amy Hardwick, Sustainability and Environmental Manager. Agrii's Neil Harper, Agronomist and Arable Technical Manager, with Alan Clifton-Holt, Farms Director at AA Clifton Limited, who farms on Romney Marsh in Kent. So good morning to you all.
Morning, Tony.
Morning.
Good morning. It's just after Christmas. You can sense the mince pies are still settling down as we come into sort of getting our minds back into practical farming and how we can lend some top tips for farmers who are listening today. So, Amy, can you sort of create that the context really of why should farmers listen to accessing these additional income streams if they are accessible?
Yeah, absolutely. So farm profitability nowadays is increasingly shaped by factors beyond our control, whether that be economically, what's happening with policy and environmental schemes, Brexit, or environmentally as well with things such as climate change. So with so much uncertainty and so many things out of our control, it's really important to look at what factors we can control within the system. That might be things such as what we're putting into the ground each year. That might be looking at ways of earning different income streams or different revenues on farm, and also things like soil health, variety choices as well. So with all of these things at play, we're really looking to where we can start diversifying what we do on farm to make sure that we're there in 10 or 20 years' time as a farm business, through earning money through different revenue streams, essentially. So it might not always be around food production. It might be through environmental revenue streams such as carbon, as we've mentioned. SFI's been quite a big player in the last 3 years. But there's also a lot of other private sector funding streams as well. There was a recent review that was done by AHDB last year, which showed that there was 75 different revenue opportunities available in environmental for farmers. So really it's about looking at how we tap into those and which ones are applicable to different farms across the UK.
And Alan, listening to Amy there, is this the way farms are having to think, and is this the way you're having to think in terms of looking ahead in your farm business?
Yeah, absolutely. The reality of the ground in farming, especially arable farming at the moment, is pretty tough. We've got 3 years potentially of low pricing. We've got to build a scenario where we can maximise value coming through the farm and coming through the gate to us. And this is one aspect that potentially can do it. And kind of why wouldn't you do it? Is the ultimate question.
And Alan, that's a great question to ask, isn't it? Neil, are schemes such as this accessible and easily accessible for, a wide variety of farmers?
Yes, I think they are. I think the challenge is just understanding the value you get from the work put in. From my perspective, it's giving the advice to the growers on what I think they should look at and understanding it myself and what work's involved. There's enough red tape and paperwork being done at the moment on farm and enough challenges. It sounds a bit funny, but many farmers aren't keen on spending hours in the office. So if we can look at these things to get value from it, to support it in all aspects, we've lost a lot of other payments. There's a lot of volatility around. Every little's going to help. And these sort of any of stacking of these options that are out there are definitely worth the time and effort to have a look at what value it might bring to any business.
A very interesting discussion indeed. Amy, can you enlighten us really in terms of how the Agrii-Agreena partnership is now delivering the scheme and what it means for growers who may be interested?
Carbon programs have been around for quite a few years now, so probably 4 or 5 years, I'd say, as a whole, and they have evolved significantly over that time period. When we look back to 5 years ago, it was very regimented. It was a long-term commitment that you had to sign up to for, say, 10, 15 years. And there was a lot of paperwork involved, which instantly put a lot of farmers off even looking at it as a start point. However, it has evolved significantly since then, and we're now at a stage where we have an offer available that works alongside food production, which is what makes it really attractive because there's a lot of other revenue streams. I mentioned SFI again, things like winter bird food, pollen and nectar mixes that require you to take some land out of production to earn that revenue stream. However, carbon programs really do work alongside food production, and you can do it hand in hand, which brings that point around stacking benefits together. So you're stacking two different revenue streams on 1 hectare, as an example. The Agrii model and carbon programs in general tend to work more flexibly now. So they're on an annual rolling contract. So instead of that long-term commitment that we saw at the start, it's now a 1-year rolling contract where you're really looking at how you're reducing the emissions of the food that you're producing, as well as what's happening in the soil. So that's one key element to get your head around, first of all. It's not all around soil carbon. It's actually about what are you doing in that farming system to try and reduce carbon. So whether that be managing your cultivations appropriately or managing your nutritional input, those things can have quite a significant impact on how much you earn. The model itself, how much you can earn really varies depending on what you're doing on a farm. So if you say are doing very little towards regenerative farming, or perhaps you're in a plough-based system, you're going to be earning a lot less than if you're a farmer that is direct drilling, is using organic fertilizers or inhibitors, and also things such as cover cropping can help earn you more money essentially on the program. So that flexibility is really important for a lot of farmers because it gives them the flexibility to not work to a strict regimented routine, but actually to carry on farming as they always have, and then have this extra income stream on top.
And I guess the question that farmers who are listening today will ask is it really worth my while? You know, that time at the desk, I much prefer to be off doing something else. Is it worth their while?
Yeah, 100%. I think 3 years ago, I jumped on board with this when it first came along and approached 4 or 5 of my growers, took the time to do the first one and went through it, filled in the forms, and was surprised to the value because there was no change of what people were doing. So I liked the fact this was all above ground, I call it. So it's taking the yield and offsetting it to work what carbon's left. So it's a bit more simpler to do it. And we had some good inputs. Then last year had another go, obviously still waiting for final figures, but got ideas, and having to go on the platform again this year and seeing the potential. Amy's right. I like the way of the simplicity of opting out of certain fields. If there's certain fields that aren't going to make you any carbon, you really might not need to put them in. So you can cut them off for a year and bring them back in again if you want to. But first of all, yes, I've seen nearly on 90% of all the fields that we've been putting in, we are seeing a return or a value for the time being spent to do this, of a carbon credit in your bank or whatever way it is. Not that many have sold any yet, but they are getting their head around to see where the value is to accumulate these for moving forward, what the future might hold.
Yeah. So just to stress this point, that the step change in the way this system is working, this scheme is working, Amy, it's about simplicity, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, it was quite a complicated system 5 years ago, and Neil's highlighted some of the time implications involved there. But this year in particular, the Agrii model has moved to what's called a verification system. Now, that's changed the way they operate, the way they work, and the way they generate credits. If you go onto their program now for Harvest 26, it's massively different to what it was in Harvest 23, whereby you put your SBI number in, your farm identifier number in, into the system. It will generate that in the background, bring up your land parcels, and they've actually got to the stage now where they can remote sense what you have done in that field for the last 5 years. So whether that be cover cropping, what sort of tillage you've undertaken, and also what crops in the field. It's quite significant when you look at it. The people that I've spoken to have had a go with it have said it's actually very accurate. And really just to point out that all of that step process is free. So there is no charge to the farmer to have a look at that. And all you have to do to that point is put your SBI number in. Now, of course, that's not 100% accurate. And I don't think they're trying to claim it's 100% accurate. But what that does do is that it reduces your time inputting data into the system. So as you can imagine, if it's already got your cropping rotation in there, where you've put cover crops in the last 5 years and your cultivations automatically populated over 100 fields, it's a lot less time for you to actually input that manually. And instead you have to go through that and say, this area is right, this area is perhaps not quite right, and just edit the ones that need altering. But the power of that is it gives you an estimate simply by just putting that SBI number in. The estimates are ranged, so it would say something between like 30 to 50 pound a hectare, for example. That will give you a indication from the get-go as to whether it's worth your time input. If you feel from that it is worth your time input, then you can actually take that next step where you start putting things like your fertilizer usage in to generate a more accurate value or return on investment. So it's a really powerful tool for people to have a go. And this is the whole point of why we're talking about this today, is to encourage people to have a look, not necessarily committing to selling carbon off the offset, but really just to start that process by putting your business information in, just to get an estimate to see what value that could return and whether it might work for your business.
And if you would like to start that process, why not click on the link in the podcast bio to find out the value for your farm. Alan, I know that you have, if you like, trialled and tested this scheme. In terms of your farm operation, was there a value? Was it worth your while?
So the difficulty with it is on an open market, so the values do change. So I haven't looked at it for a little bit because the values go up and down. But last time I looked, I think we were on about 40,000 from a year income out of it, which is significant, and it's significant enough. Probably the difficulty bit we had was we had to put it on our balance sheet and declare it and say, actually, there's an asset there that we've got. Now you start turning around to an accountant and saying, actually, we've got a value there. They really do scratch their head with it and go, right, this could be a bit more interesting and a bit more positive for an industry that is under stress. And for something that we really haven't had to change many practices for. We've been growing cover crops for 15 years. We've had spring crops in our system. It's part of our whole farming package that we do. There's nothing that we have done to change to go after carbon, to go after the Agrii program. We've just farmed how we would want to farm. And so all those kind of positive attributes have delivered an income of, as I say, 35, 40,000. But the market does fluctuate. So that's why I'm being slightly cautious about naming a price on it.
Can you share a little bit about, what is your approach in terms of husbandry, cultivations, rotation, etc.? Regenerative farming, is that something that you participate in?
Absolutely. But what I would also say is we're not regenerative farmers. We're not direct drilling. Yeah, there are crops that we do direct drill with, but as a cereal farmer, we are high input, high output for cereal farmers. We are cultivating the ground. We don't plough, but we are doing many other cultivation operations. And all of those add value. Some of the other niche crops we grow really add value in the carbon market, which once you look into it, is the real, I suppose, cherry on the top of things.
Thanks, Alan. And Neil, from your perspective as an agronomist, what are you seeing other farmers doing that is potentially increasing their carbon value?
I think the biggest thing that I've seen is the use of organic or inorganic fertilizers, so organic manures, and understanding your diesel usage. They're the two big factors that make quite a bit of difference to some of the figures. But as Alan's pointed out, most of my growers are not changing their practices. We sit down and it can take anything from 1 hour in the past to 5-6 hours to input this stuff. I know the system looks a lot better and I think we should half that. But like someone like Alan, we're putting in 120, 130 fields. It's about 4 or 5 hours work for doing it. Nothing changed. And Alan's highlighted, 30, 40,000 pounds potential return from a 4 or 5 hours work for doing that. The biggest thing I found is the data. If you've got the right data for yields, what you've been using, what you've been up to, if you can lay your hands on that, this is a very quick and easy process. But there is ways, if you haven't got that there is standardized figurization, and Agrii have been very helpful, I've found, over the previous years. And as Amy said, they have a new platform this year, which I've had a look at over the Christmas break as I got a bit bored. And I've actually found it a lot easier to block fields together, having a look at it. So quite pleasing that this year, moving forward with growers, we should be able to complete this a lot easier moving forward. But most of my growers are low disturbance subsoilers. Some of them are having to plough, Tony. You know, they're having to do a plough because it's the right thing agronomically to do for their farm. So they are still doing everything agronomically correctly to deliver what they need on the farm. And this is a little bolt on the side.
And Alan, for you as a farmer, would you be encouraged or enticed to change your farming practices in order to increase your carbon value? Or have you already done that?
I don't think it has, but the human brain's a funny thing, and subconsciously, with money attached, it probably has. But I generally don't think it has changed dramatically the direction of travel we've been in. We've been doing cover crops for 15 years. We've been doing all the right practices for a long, long time. But do I look at some of our new crops, take flax for our sake, for fibre, which is particularly good for carbon? Yeah, it did dawn on me pretty early on that actually that would be worth quite a bit of money attached to that crop and really add value for it. So it's those small things that I suppose kind of reinforce your brain. What I quite like about the fact that Agrii are supportive so much, and especially Neil, the amount of work he does into it, it adds value to their time, certainly in the advice world, the way life is changing with AI coming in. Certainly the way Neil and I work together is that he has to justify his time, justify how much return to the business he's generating. And this is a good way of him showing that he's generating that return and for us, and is not a cost drain, but a cost positive, with actual cash coming in rather than me paying for chemicals.
So, Amy, linking back to where we started, this seems like a nice and yet rare bit of a good news story for farmers. How would you sum it up? What would you encourage farmers to do as a result of maybe listening in today?
So I guess my main point to anybody who would be listening to this is to have a look at whether it be carbon or anything else, but specifically for this podcast is to have a look at the Agrii platform. I've mentioned already, and I think Alan and Neil have also backed me up here, that it's not a massively time-consuming piece to just have a look to see what it could be worth to your business, and then you can take it further if you feel that that's necessary. But yeah, that would probably be my main point, is have a go, Tony.
Thanks, Amy. Indeed. Have a go. Have a look at this scheme. Neil, for you, what would be the top tips that you would like to share?
My top tip is, I would say, is never close off and think there's no point in looking at something. You know, I've got farms of 50 hectares up to 1,500 hectares having a play. So even doesn't matter the size or scale of you, they're all quite keen to have a look at the value of this to see what's going on.
And Alan, if we leave the last words with you, when you look at your farm business, is this a scheme that you feel is worth really looking at seriously?
Carbon, it is a difficult kind of item to pin down, because it does vary depending on what goes on in your soil, in your total environment, what you're doing. So I'm not turning around and saying it's going to be the same figure every year coming forward, but I am going to say there is a number there that we should grab hold of.
Thank you, Amy, Neil and Alan, for sharing your insights when it comes to harnessing the value of carbon on your farm. Do stay tuned here on Tramlines, recent episodes live from events and discussions on varieties, nutrition and much more. If you have any questions for our experts that you'd like answered, email them into info@agrii.co.uk. That's it for this podcast, but do tune in again as we meet the experts throughout the season, exploring the many immediate and longer-term questions for growers and farmers in the UK. See you next time.